Welcome to the Deep Dive, your express lane to profound understanding. Think of the All Sorts podcast as your intellectual playground, and the Deep Dive. Well, this is where we really get into it, see how things work. Today, we're zeroing in on something powerful, often invisible, that really shapes our decisions, our feelings, the scarcity mindset.
Exactly. We're taking a close look at what this mindset actually is. You know, that feeling of not enough.
Right.
And how it impacts our thoughts, our actions, even when maybe objectively we have plenty. And crucially, how we can start shifting away from it.
Okay.
We've pulled together insights from, well, all over online discussions, some really cutting-edge neuroscience research, expert advice, the works.
So the goal is to give everyone listening a clear, useful handle on this, fast.
That's the plan. A shortcut to understanding this key bit of psychology.
Because we know your time is valuable, right?
Yeah.
You might be prepping for a meeting, trying to get up to speed in a field, or maybe you're just curious. So this deep dive is designed for that efficient, illuminating, hitting those aha moments without getting bogged down.
Definitely.
Okay, let's get right to it. What exactly is this scarcity mindset?
Well, at its core, it's that persistent feeling, that nagging sense that you have less than you need.
And not just money, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It can be time, resources, opportunities, even things like love or feeling recognized.
Huh.
Someone online mentioned this deep-seated feeling of financial scarcity, despite, working really hard and actually being pretty stable now. It's that internal sense of lack.
Which tells me straight away, it's not just about what's actually in your bank account or how many hours are in the day.
Precisely. Scarcity is often, maybe even mostly, about perception. It's subjective.
Yeah.
Research highlights this too. Even when people are materially comfortable, relatively speaking, many still feel like resources are insufficient. It's the perceived lack that drives it.
And this feeling, this not enough, it can really narrow your focus, can't it? Like tunnel vision.
That's a great way to put it. There's this phenomenon called tunneling. When we feel scarcity, our focus just zooms in really intensely on whatever we feel we're lacking.
Like driving through an actual tunnel.
Exactly. You only see the road right ahead, you lose the periphery, the wider view.
So if you're constantly worried about money, maybe you obsess over saving pennies, but miss a bigger investment opportunity, or it strains your relationships.
That's it. And this intense focus, it has a cost. Some call it the tunneling tax.
The tunneling tax. Okay.
It's everything else you miss, everything you neglect, because your attention is just glued to that one area of perceived lack. Opportunities pass you by, maybe your health suffers, relationships get strained.
It blinds you to other things.
Yeah, and it makes it harder to find long-term solutions, ironically keeping you stuck in that feeling.
You mentioned online discussions. Did they get into where this feeling comes from? Is it learned?
That's a really important point. It seems it's often tied to deeper beliefs about ourselves, about our own worth. People shared common negative beliefs about money, like money doesn't grow on trees or there's never enough, but it went deeper.
Also.
Beliefs about their own value, their identity, sort of a core feeling of not being enough or not deserving enough, regardless of the actual situation. It's often less about the external reality and more about that internal landscape.
Okay, so we've got perceived lack, tunnel vision, often rooted in self-worth. Now, how does this actually play out? How does it affect how we think, how we act day to day?
Right. This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit concerning. Scarcity doesn't just feel bad. It actively messes with our thinking processes.
Messes with them how?
Well, one way to think about it is like trying to concentrate with constant interruptions. Imagine loud noises or trains constantly rumbling past your window.
Okay, yeah. Distracting.
Scarcity creates a similar mental distraction. It's constantly pulling your attention back to what you feel you're missing, making it harder to focus, harder to engage in, higher level thinking, planning.
So it's like part of your brain is always running this background worry program.
Exactly, just constantly monitoring the lack. And this preoccupation can become totally consuming.
Consuming?
There was that classic starvation experiment where people became utterly obsessed with food. It dominated everything, their thoughts, conversations, dreams. It shows the sheer power of perceived lack to just take over your focus.
Wow, that's extreme. But I can see how even a lower level of scarcity could be a constant drain.
A huge drain. And it has knock-on effects. Think about the constant trade-offs you have to make when you feel scarcity. Pay this bill or that one. Focus on this urgent task or that important one.
Right. Those decisions pile up.
They do. And research suggests making these constant trade-offs actually depletes our mental resources. It leads to reduced self-control, makes us more impulsive, more likely to make short-sighted decisions.
Like the executive juggling too many things, or someone without savings making an impulse buy.
Exactly, those kinds of examples. Every decision feels heavier, more taxing, when you feel you don't have enough breathing room.
And isn't there like a cycle to this? It feeds itself.
Yes, absolutely. You can think of it as the scarcity mindset cycle. It starts with an unmet need.
Okay.
That creates the feeling of scarcity. This feeling then interrupts your thinking, your processing.
Is it harder to think clearly?
Right, which leads to an even greater focus on that unmet need. This forces you into difficult trade-offs, which causes decision fatigue.
Exhausting.
Yeah, and that fatigue leads to those myopic short-term decisions we talked about. And those decisions, they often just create more scarcity down the line.
So it's a loop, a trap almost.
It really can be. The feeling of lack itself makes it harder to make the choices that could actually reduce the lack.
And this isn't just psychological theory, is it? There's actual brain science backing this up.
There is. Some fascinating neuroscience looked directly at this. They basically induced a feeling of scarcity in people through recall tasks, getting them to focus on times they felt lack. Then they had them do tasks requiring mental flexibility, like switching between different rules quickly while monitoring their brain activity.
Okay, and what happened? What did the scans show?
Well, first, the behavior. The people feeling scarcity were significantly slower when they had to switch tasks. There was a bigger switching cost, we call it.
Like it took more effort for their brains to change gears.
Exactly. It showed reduced cognitive flexibility. They found it harder to adapt when the rules changed.
So feeling lack literally made their brains less agile.
That's what it looks like. And the brain scans, the EEG data, showed a difference too. There was increased activity in a specific brain wave, the P3 wave, in a part of the brain involved in attention and processing the parietal cortex.
Maybe.
It suggests the brain was actually working harder, using more resources, just to manage the feeling of scarcity itself, which leaves fewer resources for everything else, like that flexible thinking.
Wow. So it has real tangible effects on brain function.
Absolutely. It links back to this idea of bandwidth load in scarcity theory. Our mental bandwidth, our attention, it's finite.
Like RAM on a computer.
Good analogy. If scarcity thoughts are constantly using up that bandwidth, there's just less processing power left for planning, problem solving, creativity, all the higher level stuff.
Makes total sense. You're too busy worrying about the immediate lack to think long term.
Precisely. And that often leads to focusing only on the urgent stuff, putting out fires, rather than the truly important things.
And maybe relying on quick fixes.
Yes, like taking out high interest loans or other things that might help right now, but actually dig the hole deeper later on.
Okay, this is painting a pretty clear picture. But one thing that really surprised me was reading that even people with, significant wealth can get stuck in this mindset.
Yeah.
That seems paradoxical.
It does seem counterintuitive, doesn't it? But it's definitely a thing. The scarcity mindset can absolutely affect high earners. It just shows up in different ways.
Like what? Hoarding cash instead of investing it?
That's a classic one. Despite having plenty of resources, someone with this mindset might operate from this deep, irrational fear of running out.
So they keep huge amounts in savings accounts.
Yeah, excessive amounts in low-yield savings, maybe even literally hoarding cash. Or they might overinsure against every possible risk, way beyond what's rational, because of that underlying anxiety that doesn't match their actual financial reality.
And what about overworking? Pushing for more and more money they don't necessarily need.
That's another big one. They get caught in this cycle of constantly striving for more income, not because they need it, but driven by this fear of, falling behind or losing it all.
So they never actually enjoy the wealth they have?
Often no. They postpone enjoyment, always thinking, I'll relax when I hit this next target, but the target keeps moving. It can lead to serious burnout, feeling like life is always on hold, perpetually chasing something fueled by that not enough feeling.
There's also something about frugality that doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, right. Like spending hours trying to save a few dollars on something insignificant when their time is actually incredibly valuable and could be spent on, say, strategic financial planning.
Or being unwilling to pay for help.
Exactly. Reluctance to delegate tasks or hire professionals, accountants, advisors, even when it would clearly save them time, stress, and maybe even money in the long run. There's just this resistance to spending, even on things that would improve their lives.
So that scarcity feeling can really warp financial behavior, even when there's objective abundance.
It really can. It just drives home how much of this is internal, our perceptions, our beliefs, not just the external facts.
It's so pervasive. But is it all negative? Didn't some sources suggest there might be maybe small upsides in certain situations?
That's fair. It's important to have a balanced view. In some specific, usually short-term contexts, scarcity can sharpen focus and boost efficiency. Well, research has shown that sometimes people with very limited budgets can be incredibly value conscious. They have to be, right? They might make more rational economic decisions about immediate needs because every dollar counts so much.
So having less can force a kind of discipline, a more thoughtful approach to using resources.
In the very short term, yes. It can definitely make you prioritize ruthlessly when resources are truly tight. But, and this is a big but,
Yeah.
the chronic stress, the cognitive load, the tunneling effect of prolonged scarcity almost always outweighs these limited temporary benefits. The long-term costs are usually much higher.
Okay, that makes sense. So we understand what it is, how it works, how it hits our thinking, even our brains, and that it affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The big question then is, how do we get out of it? How do we break free?
This is where the idea of actively cultivating a different mindset comes in, often called a growth mindset.
A growth mindset.
Yeah, it's about fostering the belief that we can learn, grow, adapt, that we aren't just fixed in a state of lack or limitation. It's the antidote, really.
And there are practical things we could actually do to nurture that and push back against scarcity.
Absolutely. Lots of concrete strategies. One of the most powerful, though it sounds simple, is practicing gratitude.
Gratitude, okay.
Consciously focusing on appreciating what you do have instead of always fixating on what's missing. It starts to shift your whole perspective, helps you see the abundance that's already there, even in small ways.
And challenging those negative beliefs we talked about earlier.
Crucial. You have to actively question them. Are they really true? Where did they come from? Just examining those ingrained assumptions about lack can open your eyes to possibilities you just didn't see before.
Setting realistic goals seems important too. Maybe breaking big things down.
Yes, exactly. Big goals can feel overwhelming when you're in a scarcity state. Breaking them into small, manageable steps makes them feel achievable,
And you get small wins along the way.
which builds momentum and confidence. It directly counters that fear and paralysis that scarcity often brings. And really importantly, celebrate those small wins. Acknowledge the progress.
What about setbacks? Because they happen, right. How do you deal with those without falling back into, see, I don't have enough?
That's where reframing is key. A growth mindset sees mistakes or challenges not as proof of inadequacy, but as opportunities. Opportunities to learn, to adjust, to get stronger.
So embrace the challenge instead of fearing it.
Yes, and build resilience, that ability to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Also, practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself when things are tough instead of beating yourself up. That self-criticism is often a big part of the scarcity feeling.
Having supportive people around you must help too.
Huge. A good network provides encouragement, perspective, sometimes practical help, and consciously focusing on areas where you do feel abundant helps too.
Like even if money is tight, maybe you have strong relationships or skills.
Exactly. Remind yourself of those strengths, those resources. It counteracts the negativity and reminds you of your inherent value.
Okay, so a lot of internal work, mindset shifts. What about external changes? I remember reading about the importance of Slack.
Yes. Slack. That buffer of resources, extra time, a bit of extra money, even just mental space.
It sounds like inefficiency, maybe.
Well, traditionally, maybe it was seen that way. But the newer thinking, the behavioral perspective, sees Slack as absolutely necessary.
Necessary for what?
For change, for agility, for creativity, for strategic thinking. If you're constantly operating at 110% capacity, you have zero room to maneuver.
No breathing room.
Right. No space to deal with the unexpected, to explore new ideas, to plan for the future. Slack isn't waste. It's the capacity for better decisions and long-term well-being.
So how do we build that in? How do we create Slack?
There are lots of ways. Actively managing your workload, really prioritizing ruthlessly, cutting out the busy work, the non-essential stuff that just eats time.
Saying no more often?
Potentially, yeah. Also, intentionally building in recovery periods. Shorter meetings, maybe, taking real breaks, building buffers for unexpected delays or problems.
Planning for things to go wrong, basically.
Well, sort of, yeah. Proactive buffering. And using tricks like pre-commitment, deciding in advance to save a small amount, or to block out focus time. Small steps that build slack over time.
And also breaking down big tasks.
Yes, helps you estimate the effort better so you don't run out of time. Starting your day with clear priorities, scheduling focused work time, turning off distractions. Meditation can help create mental slack.
Little things add up.
They really do. Building in rest after intense effort, having a dedicated space for focused work. It's about consciously designing your life and work to have that buffer, that slack.
So it sounds like tackling the scarcity mindset is really two things: changing how you think inside and changing how you structure things outside.
Exactly. It's an inner game and an outer game. You
Yeah.
need that internal shift in perspective and belief combined with practical changes in your habits and environment.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the scarcity mindset is this really powerful psychological force. It can affect anyone, truly anyone, no matter their objective situation. It messes with our thinking, our ability to make good decisions, our overall sense of well-being, often creating these loops that are hard to escape.
But the good news is we can escape.
Right. By understanding how it works, by consciously working on our mindset gratitude, challenging beliefs, growth, and by actively building in that crucial slack into our lives, we can make real improvements.
Definitely. Just recognizing its influence is a massive first step towards regaining control and fostering a life that feels more abundant, more fulfilling.
So for everyone listening, as you go about your day, maybe just pause for a second. Think about one area in your life where you might feel that sense of not enough.
Yeah.
And then just consider one small thing, one tiny step you could take, maybe even today, to introduce just a little bit more slack, or to consciously focus on the abundance that is there.
Like a seed of insight taking root, we really hope this deep dive into the scarcity mindset blossoms in your awareness, nurturing a greater sense of abundance in your daily life.
And if you found this valuable, if these ideas resonated, please do share this deep dive. Pass it along to friends, family, colleagues, anyone you think might benefit. Let the knowledge ripple outwards.
Please subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. There's a whole garden of previous deep dives waiting for you there, each one exploring a different fascinating topic designed to bring clarity and understanding.
And follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We share little seeds of thought there every day, building a community of curious minds who love to explore these ideas.
Your shares, your subscriptions, your comments, they really help us grow and keep bringing you these explorations. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today on the All Sorts podcast.